The first time I heard the words, "No species enters human space," I was a boy sitting on a steel crate in the back of a rusted freighter. My father said it like a prayer, low and heavy, as if the walls themselves were listening. He wasn't the kind of man who feared gods or laws, but he feared that rule. Everyone did. It wasn't written in any treaty, not carved into the records of the Galactic Council. It was unwritten, unspoken, but obeyed. No alien ship, no matter how advanced or arrogant, dared cross the invisible boundary that marked the edge of human territory. The reason why was never fully explained. We heard rumors, whispers in the stations beyond our borders, half-drunk stories told by traders who swore they saw fleets vanish when they crossed the line, ships full of warriors, hunters, mercenaries, gone without a trace. The galaxy feared humans, but not because of power. They feared us because they didn't understand us. I grew into a man under that shadow, with questions burning in my chest. I saw what the galaxy thought of us, scraps of respect laced with disgust. To them, we were unpredictable, savage, untamed. They traded with us when they had to, but they never came too close. They never lingered near the line. But I wasn't satisfied with shadows and rumors. When I was drafted into the Colonial Guard, I thought I would finally see the truth for myself. Our patrol routes often skimmed the border of human space. Those silent markers of where we ended and they began. My captain barked the same line my father once did. "No species enters human space, and that includes us unless ordered." His eyes didn't just command, they pleaded. Even he didn't want to cross that line. It became an obsession for me. Every soldier needs something to hold on to, and mine was the question. What's in there that makes the galaxy keep its distance? One night, on a border watch, I got my answer. Or at least the beginning of it. We caught an alien raider ship drifting just outside our territory, a broken thing, scarred and burning, its engines spitting out smoke and fire. We hailed it, but the only reply was silence, then a faint distress signal. Against orders, we pulled it aboard. My captain cursed me for volunteering to board first, but I didn't care. Inside that ship, I saw hell. The crew, half reptilian, half insectoid, tough species known for raiding colonies, was dead. Not in combat, not in fire. They were torn apart, shredded from the inside, as if something had grown out of them and ripped its way free. The air reeked of iron and decay, thick enough to choke. I found one survivor, pinned to a wall, bleeding black blood from his mouth. His eyes, wide with a terror I'd never seen in any warrior, locked onto mine. He grabbed me with claws, still wet with his own flesh, and croaked out one phrase: "Humans, not safe. No one comes back." Then he died. I stood there, my rifle cold in my hands, staring at what was left of his crew. Something had killed them, something they carried back with them from inside our space. That was the first time I felt it. Not just the fear, but the weight. The truth wasn't just that no species entered human space. The truth was that the ones who tried never returned whole. And as I stood there, listening to the silence of the ship, a part of me realized something darker. Maybe we didn't even know what we were keeping inside. The alien's body was still warm when I let it slip from my grip. My gloves were slick with its blood, black and tar-like, clinging to my skin as if it didn't want to let me go. I stared down at it, trying to breathe through the filter of my helmet, trying not to gag on the smell that had already seeped into everything. Humans, not safe. No one comes back. Those words dug into me, sharper than any knife, sharper than the claws that had tried to hold me upright. I'd seen plenty of soldiers die. I'd even seen friends die, but nothing in my life had ever looked like that, like a being so hardened by war, by raiding and slaughter, could look into my eyes and die in pure terror. I should have reported it right there. Should have called the captain, logged the death, sealed the bay, followed the rules drilled into my skull since the first day of training. But I didn't. Instead, I lingered. I moved deeper into the raider ship, leaving my comm silent, my rifle aimed at shadows that twisted with every flicker of the failing lights. The corridors were lined with blood, not sprayed in combat, not the pattern of firefights or panic. This was different. The walls had been painted with it, smeared by bodies dragged against metal. I followed the marks and saw where the creatures had died. Clumps of limbs, shredded torsos, faces frozen mid-scream. And the worst part was how quiet it all was. No growl of engines, no hum of power. Just the steady drip of blood that hadn't yet dried. And then I found the nest. That's the only word I can use for it. A chamber at the ship's center, walls cracked and broken by some force that had pushed outward. The floor was littered with husks, empty shells of what had once been alien bodies. Their rib cages had split from the inside. Some had holes punched straight through their skulls. And on the walls, etched into the steel with something jagged and deliberate, were symbols I didn't recognize. Sharp, angular lines, carved deep as if whoever made them had infinite strength and no patience. But they weren't alien. They weren't random. I knew that even before I traced one with my gloved hand. They were human. Not letters exactly, not words in any language I knew. But they carried that weight, that rhythm. They felt ours. Something inside that ship had written on the walls. And it hadn't been the crew. I should have turned back. Should have pulled my team aboard, reported contamination, burned the ship to dust. Instead, I found myself kneeling in the middle of the nest, staring at those symbols, whispering under my breath like a lunatic. What the hell did you bring back with you? By the time I returned to my own ship, I was already carrying the infection. Not in my blood, but in my mind. The image of that room, of those carvings, burned into me. I couldn't shake it. I didn't even try. The debrief was brutal. The captain tore into me the second I stepped into the command room. His eyes were red from sleepless hours, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack. "You boarded without clearance," he snapped. "You broke protocol, endangered the crew, and dragged back something we can't explain. Do you understand what you've done?" I did. I just didn't care. "The ship was already dead," I said, voice low, steady. "They were torn apart from the inside. The survivor, he said something." The captain slammed his hand against the console. "I don't give a damn what he said. You think I haven't heard their excuses before? Every species that crosses into our space dies, soldier. Every single one. And you want me to write a report about what mystical warnings scratched on a wall?" They weren't alien. That made him stop. Just for a second. His shoulders stiffened, his eyes flicked to mine, and I knew I'd struck a nerve. He knew. He leaned in, close enough that I could smell the stale bitterness of coffee on his breath. "Forget what you saw. Forget what you heard. You ever breathe a word of this to anyone outside this ship, and I'll make sure you disappear so deep not even your mother remembers your name." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. I saluted, walked out, and carried the truth with me anyway. Weeks passed. We resumed patrols. Outwardly, everything returned to normal. But inside, I was different. Every time we passed the border, I felt it. That invisible line between safe and forbidden. No map marked it. No beacon shone. But I knew exactly when we crossed near it because something inside me stirred. My skin prickled. My chest tightened. My dreams filled with symbols I couldn't read, etched in steel and blood. I started drawing them. At first on scraps of paper in my quarters, then on the walls. My bunkmates noticed. They asked questions. I shut them down. Some laughed. Some whispered. One of them, a kid fresh from training, saw the lines, frowned, and muttered, "That looks human." I wanted to hit him just for saying it out loud, because it meant I wasn't crazy. Then the nightmares began. I dreamed of being inside that nest again, except it wasn't abandoned. Shapes moved in the dark, tall and thin, with limbs that stretched too far, eyes burning like coals. They weren't aliens. They weren't human. They were something in between. Something that wore pieces of us like a mask. They whispered in voices that weren't voices, a chorus that pressed against my skull until I woke drenched in sweat, heart pounding. And every time I woke, I found the same thing. Another symbol scratched into the wall of my cabin, sometimes with a knife, sometimes with my own fingernails. Always the same lines I'd seen in the raider ship. I tried to tell myself I was losing my mind, tried to convince myself it was stress, paranoia, trauma. But deep down, I knew. This wasn't madness. It was revelation. One night, while on watch, the alarms blared. A ship had crossed the border. We scrambled to stations, weapons hot, systems primed. On the screen we saw it. Sleek, silver, unmistakably alien. A scout vessel from the Ilari, one of the oldest, most arrogant species in the galaxy. They'd always kept their distance, always obeyed the rule, but not this time. The captain's voice was steel. "Do not fire. Hold formation. Observe." We watched. The scout moved fast, slipping past the line like it wasn't even there. My pulse hammered as I tracked it on the radar, further and further into our space. For a moment, I thought, maybe this time it will be different. Maybe they'll prove the rumors wrong. Then the signal cut. 1 second the ship was there, the next it was gone. Not destroyed, not cloaked. Just erased. Static filled the comms. My screen went blank. And then, just for a second, I saw it. A flicker. A shape. Something vast and black, like a shadow stretching across the void. No outline, no features, just an absence, a hunger. And in that absence, I saw the same burning eyes from my dreams. I ripped off my headset, gasping for air. My hands shook. Around me, the crew shouted, panicked, demanding answers. But the captain only stood there, watching the empty screen with the expression of a man who'd seen it before. "Lock it down," he ordered. "No one speaks of this." Not a word. But I already knew silence was useless. Whatever had swallowed that ship, whatever lived in the dark of our space, it wasn't content to stay hidden anymore. It was leaking out, into our ships, into our minds, into me. After that night, I stopped pretending. I stopped following orders. I stopped pretending I was like the others. I let the symbols cover my walls, my skin, my thoughts. I stopped fighting the whispers in my dreams. Because deep down, I realized the truth. The galaxy wasn't afraid of humans because of what we'd done. They were afraid because of what we were keeping inside. And I was starting to think, it wasn't human space that needed protection from the galaxy. It was the galaxy that needed protection from us. The alien's body sagged in my arms before I shoved it off, its weight crashing against the steel floor with a wet slap. My gloves were thick, reinforced, but still the blood clung like tar, black and sticky, coating my fingers like it wanted to sink into me. Humans, not safe. No one comes back. That was what it had said. That was its final truth, spilled into my ears like a curse before death took it. I should have calmed the captain right then, should have followed protocol, locked the bay, run every sterilization procedure we knew. But I didn't. Something inside me wouldn't let me leave. The ship was a tomb, and I was walking deeper into it, rifle raised, every nerve burning. The further I went, the worse it became. The walls weren't just scarred with claw marks. They were streaked with blood. Thick smears dragged down corridors as if the crew had been pulled screaming into the dark. Some bodies had been ripped apart so savagely I couldn't tell what species they'd been. And then I found the chamber. I don't know what it had been before. A cargo hold, maybe, or a war room. But now it was something else. The walls had been carved, etched. Symbols dug deep into steel. Jagged strokes like knives had slashed them in. They weren't random. They weren't alien. I knew it the moment I traced a line with my finger. They were human. Not in language, not in any alphabet I'd ever seen, but they carried that weight. They felt like home. And scattered around them, like offerings to some unholy altar, were bodies split open from the inside. Empty shells. Whatever had killed them hadn't come from without. It had come from within. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. All I could do was whisper the only question that mattered. What the hell did you bring back with you? The debrief was worse than combat. The captain didn't scream. He didn't have to. His voice was ice as he stripped me bare in front of the crew. You broke protocol. You risked infection. You dragged your filth back onto my ship. They were already dead, I argued. Something tore them apart. The survivor, he warned us. He slammed his fist against the console so hard the screen flickered. Every alien that crosses into our space dies, soldier. Every single one. And you think I'm going to write a report about mystical warnings carved on a wall? They weren't alien, I said. That stopped him cold. His jaw tightened. His eyes locked on mine, and I saw it, the flicker of fear he tried to hide. He knew. He leaned close, voice low, almost shaking. You forget what you saw. You never speak of it again. If you do, I'll make sure no one remembers your name. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. I saluted, walked out, and carried the truth with me anyway. Weeks passed, but the images didn't fade. Every time we skimmed the border of human space, I felt it. The line between safe and forbidden. You couldn't see it on a map, couldn't measure it, but you knew when you were close. Your chest tightened, your skin prickled. It was like the void itself was pressing against you. And the dreams began. At first, I dreamed of the chamber, the symbols, the corpses. Then the dreams shifted. I saw shapes moving in the dark, long, thin, stretching too far to be human, but carrying human features like masks. Their eyes burned red. Their voices were whispers pressed directly into my skull. I'd wake sweating, shaking, only to find new symbols scratched into the walls of my cabin. Sometimes with a knife. Sometimes with my own nails. My bunkmates noticed. They laughed at first. Then they stopped laughing. One of them stared at the markings and muttered, "That looks human." I nearly broke his jaw just for saying it out loud. Then came the night the alarm screamed. A ship had crossed the border. We scrambled to battle stations, weapons primed. The screen lit up with its profile, sleek, silver, unmistakably Ilari, one of the oldest races, arrogant and untouchable. They had always obeyed the rule, always stayed back. Until now. The captain's order was clear. Hold formation, do not fire, observe. We watched as the Ilari vessel slipped past the invisible line, deeper into human space. My breath caught. Maybe this time they'd prove the rumors wrong. Maybe someone would finally come back. Then the signal cut. 1 second the ship was there. The next, it was gone. Not destroyed, not cloaked, just erased, like it had never existed. Static filled the comms. My screen went blank, and then, just for an instant, I saw it, a shadow, not a ship, not a creature, but an absence so vast it seemed to swallow the stars. No shape, no features, just a hunger that pressed against my chest like a hand. And in that absence, I saw those burning eyes from my dreams. I ripped my headset off, gasping for air. Around me, the crew shouted, demanded answers, panicked. But the captain? He just stood there, face pale, jaw locked. He had seen it before. "Lock it down," he ordered. "No one speaks of this. Not a word." But silence was useless. Whatever lived in our space, whatever erased the Ilari ship, it wasn't staying hidden anymore. It had touched me. It had followed me out of that raider wreck. It was in my dreams, my hands, my thoughts. And I realized something then, something I couldn't ignore. The galaxy wasn't afraid of humans because of what we'd done. They were afraid because of what we were keeping inside. And if it was already leaking into me, already spreading through my mind, then maybe it wasn't just about keeping the galaxy out of human space. Maybe it was about keeping us contained inside it. I couldn't stop thinking about that shadow. It had only appeared for a breath of a second, a flicker on the screen before the Ilari ship vanished. But it had burned itself into me, carved so deep into my memory that I saw it every time I closed my eyes. A hunger, a void with eyes that weren't eyes, watching me like I was prey. The captain tried to bury it. He sealed the logs. He erased the data. He ordered us not to speak of it. But the crew wasn't blind, and they weren't deaf. They whispered behind closed doors, and I could hear the same question in every voice. What the hell did we just see? No one dared ask him directly. But me? I couldn't let it go. I started digging where I shouldn't. At first it was scraps, old reports half erased. Rumor logs smuggled out of outposts along the border. Every single one told the same story. Alien ship enters human space. Signal cuts. Ship never returns. Sometimes wreckage drifts back, torn apart and hollow. Sometimes nothing at all, but always the same ending, and always silence from our commanders. The official line was simple. No species enters human space. But there was never an explanation. Not in training, not in records, just a rule burned into us like scripture. That should have been enough. It had been for everyone else. But I wasn't everyone else. The more I read, the more I saw patterns. The Ilari weren't the first to cross the line. Before them, there were the Drathun, the Serek, even smaller pirate clans. Some of those species had never sent expeditions again. They'd lost too much, too many. Entire fleets erased. And the ones who dared speak about it? Their accounts all said the same thing. They'd seen something in the dark. And the ones who saw it never lived long afterward. I couldn't sleep. Every time I tried, the dreams came back. Red eyes in blackness, symbols carved into steel. I'd wake gasping, my sheets twisted into ropes, my fingernails bloody from scratching at the wall. One night, I woke to find a symbol carved into the metal above my bed. Not by me, not by any knife. The grooves were deep, burned into the steel as if with heat. I reached out, trembling, and the metal was still warm. That was the night I realized it wasn't just inside my head. It was following me. The next day, I confronted the captain. He was alone in the command room, hands buried in a stack of sealed reports. His face looked older, the lines carved deeper since the Ilari ship vanished. "What's in there?" I demanded. He didn't look up. "You don't want to know?" "The hell I don't." I slammed my hands on the console. "I've seen it, I've dreamed it, it's in me now. And if you don't tell me the truth, I'll find it myself." That made him look at me. His eyes were hollow, tired, but behind them was something worse. Resignation. Like a man staring at a storm he couldn't stop. "You think you're the first?" he asked quietly. You think no one else has seen what you've seen? You're not special, soldier. You're just another fool staring too long into the dark. Then tell me what it is. He hesitated. His jaw worked, his hands clenched. For a moment, I thought he'd throw me out, maybe even lock me up. But then he leaned forward and whispered the words that still chill me. We don't know. I froze. What do you mean, you don't know? I mean exactly that. We don't know what lives in our space. We don't know where it came from or why it kills. We don't even know if it's one thing or many. All we know is this. They never cross into our territory. They never touch our colonies. They only take the ones who enter their dark. And we keep them contained by keeping everyone else out. My throat went dry. So you're saying, it's not us they're protecting. It's the galaxy. His silence was answer enough. I should have stopped then. I should have let it go, obeyed orders, lived out my years patrolling the border. But that's not who I was. That night, I pulled every log, every hidden scrap of data I could find. Reports from colonies on the edge, whispers of settlers who saw shadows moving between stars, who heard whispers in their heads at night. Most of them were dismissed as madness, hallucinations, radiation poisoning. But I knew better. And then I found it, the oldest file, buried deep, almost deleted, a recording from nearly a century ago, from the first days when humanity expanded into space. The video was static-ridden, faces blurred by time. But the voice was clear enough. A young explorer, ragged, eyes wide with terror. They're not outside, he whispered. They're inside us. That's why they don't come near. That's why no one comes back. Because once you see them, they see you too. The file ended there. I sat in the dark, staring at the screen long after it went blank. My hands were shaking. My skin felt too tight, like something was crawling beneath it. The explorer was right. I could feel it. Whatever lived in that void wasn't just watching. It had seen me, marked me, and it wasn't letting go. The first time I heard it, I thought I was losing my mind. I was alone in the barracks, staring at the ceiling, when a voice whispered my name. Not through the air, not through the comms, inside my skull. 1,000 voices at once, layered, echoing. I sat bolt upright, rifle in hand, scanning the room. Empty, silent. But the voice remained, coiling in my head like smoke. Come back. 2 words. That was all. But they shook me worse than any battlefield ever had. I pressed my hands to my ears, but it didn't matter. The voice wasn't outside. It was in me, and I knew what it wanted. The next weeks were hell. The whispers grew stronger, the dreams longer. I stopped eating. I stopped sleeping. My bunkmates avoided me, muttering that I looked half dead. Maybe I did. I could feel myself unraveling, piece by piece. But under the fear, there was something else. A pull. A need. The whispers weren't just haunting me. They were calling me. Back to the border, back to the dark. And I realized something terrifying. I wanted to go. One night, I made my choice. I stole a shuttle. Quiet, quick, slipping out of the hangar while the crew slept. My hands shook on the controls, sweat running down my face, but my heart pounded with something close to excitement. The border loomed ahead, that invisible line no one dared cross. I could feel it pressing against me even before I reached it. A weight on my chest. A scream in my skull. The whispers rose into a chorus, 1,000 voices urging me forward. I crossed. For a moment, nothing happened. Just the endless dark, stars scattered like dust. My breath caught. Maybe this was it. Just shadows and lies. Maybe the galaxy was afraid of nothing at all. Then the stars went out. One by one, they vanished, swallowed by a darkness deeper than space itself. The void spread, a shadow stretching across my vision until there was nothing left but black. And in that blackness, eyes opened. Red, burning, endless. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My body was stone, frozen under their gaze. The whispers filled me, too loud to think, too heavy to fight. And then I understood. They weren't just in human space. They weren't even creatures, not in the way we understood. They were older, deeper, things that wore the void like a cloak. And somehow they were tied to us, to humanity. We weren't their prey. We were their reflection, their vessel. Their way of bleeding into the galaxy. That was why no species entered our space. That was why no one came back. Because once they crossed that line, once they saw the truth, the void saw them too, and it never let go. I don't remember how I made it back. One moment I was staring into that endless black, and the next I was drifting in orbit near the border, the shuttle systems fried, alarms screaming. The captain's ship dragged me in. He looked at me with pure rage. But he didn't punish me. He didn't need to, because he could see it in my eyes. The void had touched me, and there was no coming back from that. They locked me in quarantine the moment they dragged my shuttle aboard. I didn't fight. I couldn't. My body was shaking too hard, my mind still lost in the blackness I'd seen. They stripped me of my gear, shoved me into a sealed chamber, and left me under the constant glare of sterilization lights. From behind the glass, I could see them staring at me, my own crew, men who'd fought beside me, bled beside me. Now they looked at me like I was a stranger, or worse, like I was already dead. The captain didn't speak to me for 3 days. He let me rot under the white lights, let me sweat and scream and claw at the walls as the whispers gnawed at my skull. On the 4th day, he came. He didn't waste time. He stood on the other side of the glass, hands behind his back, eyes colder than I'd ever seen them. "What did you see?" he asked. I wanted to lie. I wanted to tell him nothing, that I'd seen only shadows. But the truth was etched too deep into me, burning through my skin. "They're not outside," I rasped. My throat was raw, my voice hoarse. "They're inside us. They wear the void, but they look through us. Through me." His jaw tightened. For a moment I thought I saw fear flicker in his eyes. But then it was gone, replaced with steel. "You crossed the line," he said. "You brought it back with you. Do you understand what you've done?" I laughed. I couldn't help it. The sound cracked out of me, wild and broken. "It was already here. You know it. I've seen the walls, the symbols. We've been living with them all along. You're just too afraid to admit it." His silence was worse than anger. He turned and walked away, leaving me alone with the whispers. The days blurred. Sleep was impossible. The whispers wouldn't let me rest. They slithered into my ears, coiled in my brain, chanting in 1,000 voices that weren't human, but somehow sounded like me. Sometimes I caught my reflection in the steel wall. At first it was just my face. Sunken eyes, pale skin, a soldier worn thin. But then, sometimes, it shifted. For a heartbeat, I'd see red eyes staring back, burning in the dark. I punched the wall until my knuckles split. Blood smeared the steel, but when I blinked, the eyes were gone. I was losing myself. The crew started to avoid my chamber. At first, they'd watch me with curiosity, whisper among themselves. Now they wouldn't even look at me. I could feel their fear pressing in from beyond the glass. One night, I heard them arguing in the corridor. "He's infected. He's dangerous. We should space him before it spreads. The captain won't allow it. Then he's a fool. Their voices faded, but the words stayed. They were right. I wasn't just a danger. I was a ticking bomb. And yet part of me didn't care. Part of me wanted to see what would happen if they tried. Because I wasn't the same man they'd locked in here. Something else was growing inside me. The first change came without warning. I was sitting against the wall, staring at the ceiling, when the whispers surged into a roar. My vision blurred, my chest seized, and I collapsed, clawing at the floor as pain tore through me. My hands burned. I looked down, and my fingernails were black, thickening into sharp edges. My skin split along my arms, glowing faintly red beneath the cracks, as if something was pressing against the surface, trying to break free. I screamed. The crew rushed to the glass, faces pale with horror. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. My hands were normal again. My skin was unbroken. I sat there, drenched in sweat, gasping for air, staring at them through the glass. They stared back like they'd seen a monster. After that, they stopped feeding me in person. The captain ordered everything automated. Food trays slid through a slot, water pumped in through sealed tubes. No human contact. But contact wasn't what I craved. What I craved was the border. The dark. The whispers promised me answers if I returned. They promised I'd understand what I was becoming. And I believed them. The captain finally returned on the 10th day. He stood at the glass again, watching me like I was a specimen in a cage. "You're changing," he said quietly. I didn't deny it. "It's in me." "What does it want?" I leaned forward, pressing my palms against the glass. My reflection stared back, but the eyes were wrong. Too dark, too sharp. "It doesn't want," I said. "It is. It's part of us. That's why they fear us. That's why they don't cross. Because they know if it spreads, it won't stop." His jaw tightened. "You sound like them." "Maybe I am." For a moment, silence stretched between us. Then he whispered the words I never thought I'd hear. "If it comes down to it, I'll kill you myself." He walked away before I could answer. That night, the whispers gave me something new. Not just sound, not just words, images. I saw our ship drifting along the border. I saw the crew huddled in fear, whispering about me. And I saw myself, not as I was, but as I was becoming. Taller, stronger, eyes burning red, symbols etched across my skin like scars. I saw myself tearing the ship apart from the inside. And the terrifying part wasn't the image itself. It was how good it felt. I don't know how many days passed after that. Time blurred, fractured, slipped through my fingers like water. But one thing became clear. I couldn't stay locked in that chamber. The whispers didn't just want me. They wanted the crew, the ship, the galaxy. And I was the vessel to carry them forward. I stopped fighting it. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. An alarm blared in the night. Engine failure, systems glitching. I could hear the crew scrambling, shouting orders, rushing through the corridors. In the chaos, the power to my chamber flickered. The lights dimmed, the locks clicked, and I moved. Not with panic. Not with hesitation, with certainty. The door slid open, and I stepped out into the corridor. The first man who saw me froze, eyes wide. He reached for his weapon, but he was too slow. My hand closed around his throat, and strength surged through me, not mine, not human. His neck snapped like glass. The whispers roared approval, blood pooled at my feet. The crew screamed. and for the first time I didn't feel like a prisoner. I felt free. They fired on me. Bullets tore into my flesh, but I barely felt them. My skin cracked, glowing red, sealing the wounds as fast as they opened. I moved through them like fire through dry grass. Unstoppable, inevitable. Their fear fed me. Their screams filled me. And the more I killed, the clearer the whispers became. I wasn't just a soldier anymore. I wasn't just a man touched by the void. I was its weapon. The galaxy had feared human space for centuries, whispering of the darkness within. And now, standing over the bodies of my own crew, I finally understood why. It wasn't because of what was hiding there. It was because of what we could become when it chose us. And now it had chosen me. I don't remember how long I stood there, surrounded by the bodies of my crew. Their faces were frozen in terror, eyes wide, mouths twisted in screams they never finished. The steel floor was slick with their blood, warm against my boots. My chest rose and fell with a rhythm that wasn't human anymore. The whispers were no longer just voices. They were a chorus, a song inside me, guiding every step. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel alone. I felt complete. The captain had been the last to die. He tried, I'll give him that. Fought harder than any of the others, his sidearms spitting fire until the magazine clicked empty. He didn't beg, didn't scream. He just stood there with that same cold steel in his eyes and whispered, "I told you I'd kill you myself." I tore out his throat before he could try. Now the ship was mine. The systems were failing, engines coughing sparks, alarms still echoing through the corridors. But I could hear it, hear the ship itself, like it had become another vein inside me. The whispers threaded through the walls, coiling around the circuits, the fuel lines, the hull. It wasn't just me that was changing, it was everything I touched. I sat in the command chair, blood dripping from my hands onto the console. The screens flickered, dead for the crew but alive for me. Symbols crawled across them, the same ones I'd seen carved into the raider ship's walls. I could read them now. They weren't words, they were commands, and they weren't asking. They were waiting for me to act. The ship hummed beneath me, engines stabilizing, damage sealing itself in jagged lines of black and red across the hull. I hadn't pressed a single button. I hadn't issued a single order. It obeyed me because it was part of me now. And that's when I realized, this wasn't the end of me. This was the beginning. The first test came sooner than I expected. We were still near the border when another vessel appeared on the radar. A scavenger ship, small and rusted, one of those desperate drifters that made a living off whatever wreckage floated too close to forbidden space. They hailed us. Their voices crackled over the comms, cheerful, oblivious. "Looks like you've taken some damage there, friend. Need assistance?" I laughed. The sound came out wrong, too deep, too sharp. I opened the channel. "Come closer." They did. Fools. The moment their ship latched onto us, the whispers surged. My hull split like it was alive, tendrils of black and red metal lashing out, piercing the scavenger vessel before they even knew what was happening. Their screams filled the comms, high-pitched and frantic. I watched the monitors as their bodies convulsed, as their skin split, as something tore through them from the inside. They didn't die quickly. They became like me. When the process was done, their ship was gone. Dissolved into mine, its metal and circuits absorbed. And their crew? What was left of them walked the halls now, eyes burning red, skin cracked and glowing. Not human anymore. Not alien. Something else. Something mine. I wasn't alone anymore. I had soldiers. The galaxy had always whispered about the rule. No species enters human space. They thought it was fear. They thought it was caution. But it wasn't. It was containment, and I had just broken it. I didn't linger at the border. I pushed forward into alien territory, my ship humming with power I'd never felt before. Every star system I passed, I could hear it, the whispers spreading outward, calling, searching. The first to respond were the Ilari. Their patrol fleet intercepted me within days, dozens of sleek silver ships fanning out, weapons primed. Their commander hailed me, his voice full of disdain. "Human vessel, you have crossed into restricted space. Power down and prepare to be boarded." I smiled. "Board me, then." They did. The first squad of Ilari soldiers stormed my corridors with precision, weapons blazing. But the walls moved around them. Metal shifted, closing doors, twisting hallways. My new soldiers struck from the shadows, tearing them apart, spreading the infection with every slash, every wound. Their screams filled the comms. Their blood painted the floors. And then they rose again. Eyes glowing red, weapons still in their hands. Now mine. By the time the Ilari commander realized what was happening, half his fleet was already compromised. His ships fired on me, desperate, but my hull absorbed the blasts, drank the energy, grew stronger. One by one, their vessels fell silent. One by one, their crews became mine. When it was over, the commander's voice broke through the static, shaking with terror. "What are you?" I leaned toward the comm, my voice a growl. "I am what you feared." Then I cut the channel and watched as his ship dissolved into my own. The infection spread quickly after that. Every battle fed me. Every death made me stronger. Ships that came to stop me became part of me. Soldiers who raised weapons against me joined my ranks. And with every victory, the whispers grew louder, clearer. They weren't just voices anymore. They were instructions, a mission. Spread, consume, become. For centuries, the galaxy had stayed out of human space, terrified of what lurked within. They were right to be afraid, but they had misunderstood. It wasn't just about what lived inside our borders, it was about what would happen when it finally left. I began to dream of Earth. Not the Earth I'd known from history vids, not the shining cradle of humanity. No, this Earth was different. Dark, twisted, cities pulsed with red light, towers of living steel stretching into the sky. People walked the streets with eyes burning, voices whispering in unison, and above it all, shadows loomed, watching, guiding. I woke from those dreams shaking, my chest tight, my skin burning, but deep down, I knew the truth. That was the future. Not just for Earth, for everything. The galaxy noticed me. It couldn't ignore me anymore. The council called emergency meetings, their broadcasts filled with panic. Species that had once laughed at humanity's savagery now whispered of invasion, of contagion, of something far worse than war. They spoke of me. The first reports called me the Ghost Fleet, then the Black Tide. Finally, one name stuck: the Vessel. I wore it proudly, because that's what I was. Not a man, not a soldier, not even human anymore. I was the vessel for what had always lived inside our space, waiting for someone bold or foolish enough to carry it outward. And now it was free. But freedom came with hunger. The whispers weren't satisfied with a fleet or a handful of worlds. They pushed me further, deeper, always forward. Every star was fuel, every species was prey, and with each victory I felt myself slipping further away. Sometimes I wondered if the man I'd been was still in here, buried beneath the voices, the power, the hunger. Sometimes I thought I could hear him screaming, begging me to stop. But the whispers drowned him out. They promised me eternity, and I believed them. The last thing I saw before we entered the Sarek home system was the border we had once sworn never to cross, shrinking behind me, swallowed by distance. No species enters human space. That had been the rule, the warning, the prison walls holding back the nightmare. But I wasn't in human space anymore. And now the galaxy was going to learn why. They called me a plague. Every broadcast that reached me from the Council carried the same words: containment, eradication, extermination. They spoke my name, the vessel, as if saying it often enough would weaken me, as if giving me a title could strip away the truth of what I had become. But names don't matter. Hunger does. And my hunger was endless. The first Coalition fleet came fast. I'd barely finished consuming the Sarek home system when they arrived. 100 ships from 5 species, all bristling with weapons, all pointed at me. The Sarek had begged for help before they died. Their last transmission had been a scream, cut short when my soldiers tore their throats out mid-broadcast. The galaxy heard it, the galaxy felt it, and they united for the first time in centuries against a single enemy. Against me. I remember watching them form ranks in orbit, their ships gleaming in the starlight, weapons charging. It was almost beautiful, the way they stood shoulder to shoulder. Their differences forgotten in their fear. For a moment, I almost admired them. Then I destroyed them. The first volley struck me like a storm. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, railgun fire, all slamming into my hull at once. The void around me lit up brighter than a sun. For a heartbeat, even I wondered if they'd done it, if I'd finally been broken. But then the smoke cleared. My hull didn't burn. It fed. The blasts sank into me, the metal glowing, shifting, growing. Their weapons didn't weaken me. They nourished me. The whispers roared with laughter inside my skull. I gave the order. My soldiers poured from my ship, swarming across the void in jagged pods of living metal. They latched onto enemy vessels, splitting them open like ripe fruit. Crews screamed over open comms, their cries echoing through the void. Some tried to fight back. Some begged for mercy. None survived. And those who fell didn't stay dead. Their bodies rose again, eyes glowing red. Voices chanting with the whispers, joining my ranks. By the end, the Coalition fleet was gone. Not destroyed, not scattered, absorbed. I had grown. The broadcasts changed after that. No longer confident, no longer filled with threats. Now they were desperate. They showed my face, what was left of it, on every screen. They warned of my spread. They spoke of worlds falling silent, of fleets vanishing into the dark. Some still called for war. Others called for retreat. To abandon human space entirely, to leave me to fester until I burned myself out. But I wasn't burning out. I was only getting started. I began to hear more than whispers. Images filled my mind as I drifted between systems. Visions of alien worlds, their cities glowing in the night. I saw the faces of leaders in their palaces, of children in their beds. I saw them all, clear as if I stood among them. And with every vision came hunger. The whispers guided me, pushing me toward the next system, the next fleet, the next feast. I didn't choose my targets anymore. They chose for me, and I obeyed. The second coalition was larger. Hundreds of ships this time, gathered from nearly every species in the galaxy. They met me at the edge of the Ilari core worlds. Their formation stretched across the void like a wall of steel and fire. Their commander hailed me. "Human vessel," he said, his voice booming across the channels. "This is your last chance. Stand down, and we will make your end swift. Continue, and you will face the full force of the galaxy." I laughed. My voice rattled their comms with static, warped and broken. "The galaxy has already lost." and then I unleashed hell. The battle lasted 3 days. They fought harder than the First Fleet. They adapted, tried new tactics, new weapons. They sacrificed entire ships just to slow me down. For the first time, I felt resistance. Not enough to stop me, but enough to make me bleed. Yes, I bled. My hull cracked, my soldiers burned, my body shook under their fire. For a moment, I tasted something I hadn't felt in weeks. Pain. It only made me stronger. For every ship they destroyed, I took 3 more. For every soldier they killed, 10 of theirs rose in my ranks. Their sacrifice was meaningless, their bravery wasted. On the 3rd day, their wall broke. The Ilari homeworld burned before their eyes. Their fleets scattered. Their leaders screamed over the comms, begging for retreat. I devoured them anyway. When it was over, silence reigned. Billions were gone, entire systems erased. My fleet stretched across the stars, a tide of black and red, endless and growing. The galaxy trembled. And I realized something then. Something the whispers had been leading me toward from the beginning. This wasn't about survival. It wasn't about conquest. It was about transformation. The galaxy wasn't meant to fight me. It was meant to become me. I began to change again. My body no longer felt like flesh. My veins pulsed with light. My skin cracked and glowed. When I spoke, it wasn't with one voice, but with many. I could hear the crew I'd consumed whispering through me, their thoughts mingling with mine, a chorus of endless hunger. Sometimes I caught glimpses of myself in the glass of the command room. I wasn't human anymore. I wasn't even something that could be named. I was the void given flesh, and I was beautiful. The council grew frantic. They evacuated worlds, abandoning colonies, pulling fleets back to defend their cores. Some species turned on each other, blaming their neighbors for not doing enough. Others spoke of surrender, of offering themselves to me willingly, if it meant being spared. I welcomed them all. Those who resisted were consumed. Those who surrendered were consumed more gently. But in the end, it didn't matter. The whispers had no room for mercy, only hunger. The Third Coalition never even reached me. They fought among themselves, turning their guns on one another before they could unite. I watched from afar, laughter rumbling through me as they tore each other apart. By the time I arrived, their fleets were already broken. I swept through the wreckage, absorbing what was left. It wasn't a battle. It was a harvest. And still the whispers pushed me forward, toward Earth. I resisted at first. Some small, dying part of me screamed against it. Earth was home, the cradle of my species, the one place I swore I'd never let the void touch. But the whispers drowned that part of me out, the way a storm drowns a candle flame. I saw visions of Earth twisted, transformed, glorious, towers of living steel, oceans boiling with red light, billions whispering in unison. The galaxy would see. They would all see. I set course for Earth. The Council made its final stand there, pulling fleets from every corner of the galaxy. Thousands of ships, more than had ever been gathered in one place before, all waiting to meet me at the cradle of humanity. Their last hope, their last mistake. Earth hung in the void like a jewel, blue and green and white, untouched by the nightmare spreading across the stars. It looked fragile, small, helpless. But to me, it was more dangerous than any weapon the galaxy had ever aimed at me, because Earth was home. Or it had been once. Now it was my prize, my inheritance, the final step in the Whisper's design, and the galaxy knew it. That's why they were here. The largest fleet in history stretched across the void before me. Thousands of ships from every species that had ever raised arms against me. Sleek Ilari destroyers, hulking Seric dreadnoughts, Drathan carriers, even fragile human cruisers painted in desperate colors. For the first time, they had set aside their hatred for one another. All their hatred was for me. Their wall of steel and fire circled Earth like a shield. Weapons bristled, energy fields shimmered, engines roared. The Council's voice cut across every channel, loud enough to reach me. Vessel, this ends here. For the sake of every world, for the sake of Earth itself, you will be destroyed. I laughed. My voice poured out of every comm, every speaker, every ear. Destroyed? I said. I was born here. I am Earth. You don't protect it from me. You protect it from the truth. And then I raised my hand. My fleet moved. The first volley shook the void. Thousands of weapons fired in unison, beams and torpedoes and kinetic slugs converging on me. The space around my ship lit up brighter than a sun. But I wasn't afraid. The blasts slammed into my hull, searing, tearing. But I had grown. My body, my vessel, absorbed the fire, drank it like water, and the cracks in my flesh glowed brighter with every hit. Behind me, my fleet roared forward. Ships no longer ships, living extensions of me, their hulls twisting and writhing, their crews long since consumed. The first wave hit the Coalition's line like a storm. Alien vessels burst apart as my soldiers poured through them, claws and tendrils ripping steel open like paper. Crews fought desperately, firing point blank, screaming into their comms. Some resisted, most fell, and when they fell, they rose again, eyes burning red, voices whispering my name, their weapons turned against their former allies. The Coalition's line wavered. I pressed harder. The Ilari came for me first. Their silver destroyers formed a spear, engines blazing as they cut through the chaos, weapons locked on my command ship. Their admiral hailed me, his face a mask of fury. "You are a disease," he spat. "And diseases can be purged." I answered with silence. My hull split open, releasing a storm of black tendrils that lashed out, wrapping around his ship. The destroyer's hull groaned, bent, shattered. I pulled him in close enough to see his eyes. "They called me a vessel," I whispered, "but a vessel carries something greater than itself. And now, so will you." His scream cut off as the tendrils pierced his ship, his crew convulsing as the infection spread. Seconds later, his destroyer glowed red and joined my fleet. The Coalition's line broke further. But they didn't give up. The Seric dreadnoughts advanced next, massive ships bristling with heavy cannons. Their barrage was relentless, slamming into me with enough force to tear moons apart. For the first time in months, I staggered. Pain ripped through me, hot and sharp. I roared, a sound that shook every comm channel, rattling every ship in the battle. My fleet surged forward, smashing into the Seric line, tearing open dreadnoughts that had stood for centuries. One Seric commander broadcast his final words before his ship cracked apart. "We do not fear you." But his voice shook. His hands trembled, his crew screamed, and then they too were mine. Still, they came. Human ships, fragile, desperate, threw themselves into the fire, their weapons firing until their barrels glowed. For a moment, I faltered. For a moment, I saw their faces. Men and women who looked like me, who might have been me once. I almost stopped. Almost. But the whispers surged, drowning out the hesitation. They weren't my people anymore. They were obstacles. I crushed them as easily as the rest. Hours passed, maybe days. Time lost meaning in the storm of blood and fire. The Coalition fought harder than anyone had before, but it didn't matter. Their bravery was fuel. Their resistance was proof of their futility. One by one, their ships fell silent. One by one, their fleets burned. And through it all, Earth still hung in the void, watching, waiting. The whispers grew louder. Take it. Make it ours. The final defense broke at dawn cycle. The last coalition ship, a Drathon carrier, its hull burning, engines failing, turned to face me. Its commander appeared on my screen, her eyes hard, her voice steady. "You may win today," she said, "but you'll never own us. You'll never own Earth." I leaned closer, my face a mask of cracks and glowing light. "Earth was mine before it was yours." Then I crushed her ship in my fist. Silence fell. The greatest fleet in history was gone. And Earth was defenseless. I drifted closer. The blue planet filled my view. Clouds swirling, oceans glittering. I could see the cities now, lights twinkling like stars across the surface. Billions of humans lived there. Billions who had no idea what was coming. My hands trembled. For the first time since I'd embraced the whispers, I felt doubt. These were my people, my blood, my world. Was I about to destroy the very thing that had made me? The whispers roared in answer. Not destroy, transform. Visions flooded me, Earth remade in my image, cities of living steel, oceans of fire, billions whispering in unison, a paradise of hunger. I reached out. My fleet descended, black shadows blotting out the sun, tendrils stretching toward the atmosphere. The invasion of Earth had begun. But then, something happened. The whispers faltered. For the first time, they weren't commands. They were confused, stuttering. A sound cut through them. A voice, not theirs, mine. Faint, buried, broken, but mine. The man I had been, clawing his way out of the void, screaming against the tide. "No," he rasped. "Not Earth. Not home." The whispers roared, furious, but I felt him inside me, that last flicker of humanity, burning brighter than I thought possible. And for the first time since I'd crossed the border, I hesitated. The Earth filled my vision. Oceans glimmered like liquid sapphire. Clouds stretched in perfect spirals. The green of forests and the gold of deserts shimmered in the sunlight. It was beautiful, painfully beautiful, and it was mine to destroy. The whispers screamed inside me, 1,000 voices tearing at my skull. Take it, consume it, make it ours. My fleet loomed above the planet. Tendrils stretching downward, blotting out the sky. Billions of humans stared upward in terror, their cities trembling under the shadows I cast. But beneath the roar, another voice stirred. My own. No. A whisper, faint, fragile, but there. The man I had been, buried under layers of hunger and hate, was clawing his way to the surface. The vessel and the man collided inside me, locked in a war as brutal as any I'd fought among the stars. Memories surged. My father's voice, teaching me the rule. No species enters human space. The captain's eyes, cold but human, warning me of what I'd become. The laughter of my squad mates in the barracks, long before the whispers. The boy I had been, dreaming of the stars, believing humanity was something worth protecting. I clutched my head, roaring into the void. My soldiers froze around me, their red eyes flickering with confusion as I staggered. The whispers thundered. You are ours. You are hunger. You are endless. But the voice inside me burned hotter. I am still human. The fleet began its descent. Tendrils of black and red stabbed through the atmosphere, tearing clouds apart, reaching for cities. Screams filled the comms from Earth's surface, billions of voices rising in terror. I saw them. Children clutching their parents, soldiers raising weapons they knew couldn't save them. faces staring at the sky as their doom approached. And I broke. The whispers wanted me to see prey. But I saw my people, my blood, my world. The vessel roared in fury, the chorus of voices hammering me, demanding I obey. But for the first time, I fought back. I seized control of my ship, not as their vessel, but as myself, my human self. The hull shrieked in protest, the tendrils writhing like snakes as I forced them back. My soldiers convulsed, their bodies cracking, their red eyes flickering. The whispers howled, "You cannot resist. You are nothing without us." I bared my teeth. "Then I'll be nothing." I turned my fleet away from Earth. The whispers screamed louder, their fury shaking the void, but I held them back. My hands bled as I clawed at the controls, forcing my ships into orbit, forcing them to turn toward the blackness I'd first crossed, back toward the border, back toward human space. If I couldn't kill the whispers, I could cage them again. The fleet fought me. My own body fought me. My veins burned, my skin split, my bones cracked under the strain. The vessel wasn't just a title, it was what I had become, and it didn't want to let go, but I was stronger. Because I had something it didn't. I had Earth. The thought of losing it, of burning the only home humanity had, filled me with a rage greater than any hunger, greater than any void. I screamed, forcing the ships forward, forcing myself forward, dragging the infection back toward the prison it had always been bound to. The coalition was gone. The galaxy was silent. No one rose to stop me, but they watched. I knew they were watching. Every surviving species, every council member, every colony. They saw my fleet burning across the stars, turning away from Earth. They saw me drive the infection back into the darkness they had always feared. And they understood. This wasn't victory. It was sacrifice. When I reached the border, I felt it again, that invisible line between the galaxy and human space. Once, it had been just a mystery, a warning. Now I understood it. It wasn't a wall to keep others out. It was a wall to keep us in. I crossed it. The whispers surged with triumph, thinking I had surrendered, thinking they had won. They filled me with visions of spreading deeper, consuming even the heart of human space. But I didn't stop. I pushed further, deeper, into the core of the void. The darkness welcomed me. Shadows stretched around my fleet, swallowing starlight, erasing everything. My ships cracked and groaned, their hulls splitting as the infection writhed in ecstasy. The whispers roared, triumphant, endless. But then I gave them what they had never expected. I let go. Every wall I'd built, every barrier I'd fought to hold, I tore down myself. I opened my mind, my body, my soul. I gave them everything, and then I detonated it. The explosion wasn't fire, it wasn't light, it was silence. A silence so complete it erased the whispers, tore them out root and branch, burned them into nothing. My fleet dissolved into ash. My soldiers collapsed, their bodies disintegrating into dust. The infection screamed, but the scream faded into the void, swallowed by the silence. And me? I felt myself unravel. The vessel was gone. But the man, the human, remained, if only for a moment. Long enough to whisper the only words that mattered. Earth is safe. When the silence faded, there was nothing left of me. No ship, no soldiers, no whispers, only the void, and the border stood once more. The galaxy breathed again. Broadcasts rang out across the stars, voices trembling with relief. Earth still stood. The infection was gone. The vessel was no more. But the fear remained. because they knew the truth now. It hadn't been an alien monster. It hadn't been some external plague. It had been me, a human. And if it had chosen me once, it could choose again. On Earth, people still looked to the sky with fear. They told stories of the vessel, of the man who had almost destroyed them. Some cursed my name, some whispered it like a prayer. But no one crossed the border. Not anymore. The rule remained. No species enters human space. And now they understood why. Sometimes, I wonder if a part of me is still out there, drifting in the void, watching, waiting. The whispers are gone, but silence can be worse. Silence can hide things. Silence can grow. Maybe one day another soldier will cross the line. Maybe another man will hear the voices. Maybe another vessel will rise. If that day comes, I hope he remembers what I did. I hope he remembers Earth. And I hope he's strong enough to end it. Because I don't know if I'll be there to help him.